Hello everybody. Hopefully we are now live. If you can see and hear me, could you please just pop a little hello in the chat box so that I know we are working? We are streaming on a couple of different platforms, so just want to make sure everyone can see and hear. Let me just do some checking. Oh, yes, I can see myself there. Let's see. Are we live on YouTube? Okay, fab. Hi, okay, getting people saying hello. Fantastic. So, welcome to our last installment of our webinars with Medics and Me. Today is all about the questions that you guys have. So, we have Amy and Alice here who are going to answer all of your questions. So, if you just pop them in the comments section, I'm just going to feed them through to the team and then they'll be able to answer all of your questions. So without further ado, I will pass over to Medics and Me. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So I'm Amy. I'm a final year student. And I've also got Alice with me this evening. So we're going to be answering any questions you have. So feel free to ask any questions about medicine applications, about interview, what life's like as a medical student, anything you really want to ask. Now is your chance. We're going to be running for the next half an hour or so. So get your answers in. Get your questions in rather, and we'll give our best shot at answering them. And if we do run out of time, we will be doing a feedback form. So if you pop any questions you have on there, we'll try and answer them on our social medias. I believe there's a feedback form in the comments. If you do have any feedback for us, we would really appreciate it. It really helps us know what we're doing well, what we can improve on. So yeah, just let us know. This is the last of our series as well, by the way. So we've had 4 previous sessions. This is the last of them. So this is your last chance to ask any questions before interviews. I know lots of you have some coming up in January or in December. So this is a perfect opportunity to ask any questions.
Yeah, I'm also a final year student. I'm studying at Manchester. So if anyone has any sort of specific questions about Manchester, I'm happy to help and answer anything specific too.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to mention that. I'm at Leicester. But I also did interviews at Birmingham, Cardiff, and Nottingham. So obviously I can't give specifics because they do make you sign NDAs. But I can give some, I guess, hints or tips or give you some advice as to what the interview was like on the day or what kind of the structure was of it. Um, so yeah, feel free to ask away. I was muted then. Just while you guys have a think about any questions you might have, we do have some slides to go through. We'll go through those. And if you think of any questions during that, or if you just think of anything during, just feel free to pop it in and we will do our best to answer. So go ahead and share those now. Okay. I think hopefully you should be able to see that.
I can't see anything at the moment. I don't
No,
know.
I'm probably did that wrong then. Let me try that.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. That's a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as the title suggests, this is the last of our interview prep series with Medics and Me. And these are the lovely slides made by Alice. So we'll have a look at these.
Yeah, so I think we just put together some of the feedback we've had from some of the mocks that we've run through thus far. So we've done some mocks with students, and these are some of the things that keep coming up. and some of the things that the interviewers sort of say that people do well and maybe could improve on. So I'm going to read through a couple of them, and then if anyone has any more specific questions, again, just pop them in the chat and we can try and answer them. So firstly, I think we're going to start with sort of ethics. So common mistakes are not having read up on common interview themes, such as the pillar of ethics. So ethics often comes up. So making sure you really know what those 4 pillars are, and be sort of confident in explaining them with an example potentially. And then just making sure that what you're saying is factually correct. So this can be quite difficult, especially as lots of healthcare professionals are getting into new jobs, and there can be quite it can be quite hard to distinguish what one person can do and what another person can do. So just making sure what you're saying is correct, and if you're not too sure, just don't say it. So, for example, people can say sometimes that nurses can't prescribe. However, now some nurses can prescribe, so just be really careful with that sort of comment. And then making sure you integrate all your work experience into each answers. So even if it doesn't say sort of tell me about your work experience, you can still sort of add that into any sort of question. And if you use sort of either the point evidence explain sort of model, that can really help you to use that evidence to make you really stand out from other people. And then it is sort of common to get often the examiners will sort of give you sort of a straight face, so don't be put off by this. This is normal as well.
Yeah, so don't feel like the examiner hates your answer or you've done terribly. They are just instructed to be neutral, as to not give anyone an unfair advantage. Don't worry too much. But really important to be aware of your body language. So you might be really nervous. I was really nervous for my interviews, but try not to fidget too much. I have a habit to fiddle with my hair when I'm nervous. So maybe if you have hair that's quite long, you could tie it back to stop yourself doing that. Make sure you're not wriggling around in your chair. Just try and keep both feet on the floor, hands in your lap, or somewhere where you're not going to fiddle. Because I think having confident body language and coming across like you aren't nervous goes a long way. And I think if you're portraying yourself as not nervous, sometimes it helps you feel a little bit less nervous yourself. So that's kind of a top tip with body language. And also when you do get given the answer, or the question rather, just take a second to think about it. You don't have to answer straight away. And I think a lot of the time, if you do take a second to have a think, it shows the examiner that you're already considering what you're saying and you're not just saying something that you've rehearsed and memorized. So have a couple minutes or couple seconds to think about it. Structure your answer a little bit in your head and then go for it. And speak slower than you think. I think when we're nervous, we have a tendency to speak a lot faster, even without realizing it, and kind of rattle through the answer. So you have more time than you think, and try and speak slower than you think you need to, because in reality, that probably works out about a normal speed of talking. And it also makes you look less nervous. Um, yeah, that would be a top tip about how to kind of present your answer and present yourself. And I think a really, really key point is when you are talking about your work experience, don't just say what you did. It is important to say what you did so the examiner understands, what your work experience was. But it's really important to say what you learned from it, because that shows that you're able to reflect. And what they're really looking for is that you're able to reflect on whatever you have done for work experience or volunteering. And you've able to learnt about what being a doctor's like, about the MDT, how you've learned communication skills, how you've learned teamwork, how you've learned to work under pressure, all these really key skills they're looking for. They want to see that you've reflected on that. And that's more important than listing loads of surgeries that you saw or listing all the medical conditions you saw, even though that is important and can be an interesting thing to talk about. What they're really looking for is your reflections. And also making sure your personality is showing. They are looking for people that are going to be a member of the medical school community. They're looking for lots of different types of people, and they want to see that you're being yourself. So don't worry about having to be a certain type of person to get a medicine offer or trying to hide your true personality. I mean, it goes without saying you don't want to be making lots of inappropriate jokes or comments or not acting in a professional way, but you do still want to have your personality coming through. And yeah, an individual example. So A good example of this is the why medicine question. It's really important to think about why you want to do medicine. You see a lot of people say, I want to do something that helps people or something that links science and people skills, which, while it is true, do you have an individual reason why you want to do medicine that is perhaps a little bit more unique? Even goes to show with work experience, if you have a slightly unique thing. So I worked at McDonald's during sixth form, so I was able to use that in my medicine interview, which is not the typical work experience you do for medicine, but it really did help working under pressure, teamwork, and I was able to talk about that. And I think stuff like that makes you stand out. So yeah, that would be some top tips. So we've got some tips now for on the day. So self-belief, you deserve to be here. You've worked really hard. They wouldn't have offered you an interview if they didn't believe that you could get an offer. So believe what you've done, have confidence in yourself, because that's the first step to showing other people that you deserve an offer is believing it yourself. And don't let yourself be put off by thinking, oh, you know, I know less than other people. Other people fit in more than me. Just those negative thoughts won't help you. So try as best as you can to put those out of your head on the day. Um, People aren't trying to catch you out. So when they ask you a question in the interview, they're trying to give you an opportunity to showcase what you know and showcase the work experience that you've done or the volunteering that you've done. So just try and do that. They're not trying to catch you out and they want to see you succeed. They would give everyone an offer if they could. So they're not looking out to catch you out or anything like that. There's a lot to be said for getting there early. So make sure you're not getting the train that gets you there 10 minutes before. You're giving yourself a couple hours of buffer in case a train is cancelled or, there's traffic on the motorway. So arrive early and make sure you know where you're going. Dress professionally. So they're not expecting you to have an expensive three-piece suit or like a professional dress, but anything you'd wear to a job interview. So making sure it's on the more professional side of things. And also, when your interview's done, it's done. So try not to overanalyze or talk through with other people what answer they gave, because often there's multiple correct answers for this kind of thing. And you can make notes. Often they give you paper and pen. So feel free to make notes and then you can refer back to it during the kind of interview question side of things. So yeah, this is just some more top tips that we have. So as we said before, be confident. Confidence goes a long way. And even you could have the best, work experience, you could have the best volunteering in the world, but if you're not confident and you don't portray it well, then it won't come across well. So confidence is a key thing. As we said before, don't be put off if they're harsh. So they are told to have a neutral persona. Sometimes people can take that a little bit too far and come across quite harsh, but they will be like that for everyone. And it's not a reflection of what you're saying, it's a reflection of them just trying to be impartial and not show preference or favoritism. Don't be too rehearsed. So obviously we are doing interview prep right now. Some of you might have done prep with Medics and Me in our MMIs, or you might have school practice or tutoring, something like that. Try not to be too rehearsed because you can tell when somebody has written something out and is just reciting it. So you can think about what you might say for certain types of questions, but try not to just have a pre-prepared answer that you read out because you can tell a lot of the time and it doesn't come across as well if you do that. So nursing strikes, doctor strikes, NHS waiting times, AI, PAs, this kind of thing are hot topics. So just have a read over that and think about what you would talk about if you got asked that. But remember, with controversial things like PAs or doctor strikes or the political side of things, remember they're not asking for your personal opinion, they're asking for you to discuss a hot topic. So just make sure to keep your personal opinion to one side. Make sure anything you have put in your personal statement that you know about. This is more important at universities that have a personal statement section. And make sure that if you have put something in a personal statement, A, it's true, it's not over exaggerated, and B, you can talk about it if asked a question. This is especially true for if you've mentioned that you've wrote a book, or you've not wrote, but you've read a book, or you've read like an article or something. Make sure you have actually read the book or the article, and you can answer questions about it if asked. Because there's nothing more embarrassing than someone asking you something and you actually realize in that moment you don't know what to say. So make sure you've prepared for that. 4 pillars of medical ethics, such a key thing to go over. You could be given a medical scenario you know nothing about, and if you know the 4 pillars of ethics, you can apply them to that situation. So definitely go over those. And goes without saying, if you're at a Leicester interview, for example, make sure you've researched Leicester University. You know about their course, you know what style of course it is, you know about the city, you know some pros of the medical school, you know why you want to go there. And you need to make sure it's specific to the medical school. So why, for example, do you want to go to Leicester over Nottingham? Why do you want to go to Manchester over Liverpool? Why is it specifically about that university that you want to go there? Because that's what they're looking for, because you get the same degree at the end of the degree. So they want to know why you want to go to their medical school. You can't ask them to repeat the question, so there's nothing wrong with that. When we're nervous, it takes a little bit of time for us to take something in, and it can be harder to think than normal. So there's nothing wrong with asking someone to repeat. Have a look at the GMC Good Guidelines Good practice. I can't speak. Have a look at the GMC guidelines for good practice, because they will base questions off of that a lot of the time. So just have a look at that. It's quite a long PDF, but there are summary articles about it. So have a look at that. Look at where you're going. So again, just make sure you've got the logistics sorted, and think about how you could demonstrate empathy, teamwork, and communication skills using examples from your work experience or your volunteering. So think about, when have I displayed empathy? When have I displayed teamwork? And when have I displayed communication skills? And think about a real world example for all of those, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, cool. So I think for a lot of questions, you can answer it with the STAR technique. So hopefully you all know what this is. It's a way of formulating your answer with a bit of structure. So it makes it look like you have a really organized question and you don't waffle too much. So you start with your situation. So what was the situation that you were in? Do you need any sort of background information, and just sort of set the scene? This can be really useful for any sort of work experience questions that you might have. And then the task. So what did you have to complete, or what was the problem, or what was it that you were being asked to do? And then your action. So what did you do? And then your response. What was the outcome of this? And then reflect on it at the end. So how well did it work? And is there anything you do differently? And I think for the interview questions, the reflection's really important. So being able to reflect correctly will really make a big difference to your answer and really set you aside from everyone else. And if you think sort of STAR is quite long, you can also use the sort of point, evidence, explain. So that can be something that you can fall back onto. Just allows you to really structure your answers. And if you're a bit stuck and don't know how to answer it, just really think, what's my point? What am I trying to say? Have I got an example for it? Can I link it to work experience or life experience? And then explain it, sort of just explain and reflect on that situation. So that can be a really good way of standing out. And then these are just some things that people often struggle with that we wanted just to make sure. So how do you show that you have confidence, and how do you remain engaged during the interview? So it's really important to have good body language, which is what sort of Amy explained earlier. Just really show that you're engaged, make good eye contact with people, hand gestures as well, if that's a way that you communicate. But just sort of having a good think about it as like they're your friend or something. How would you normally speak to someone? And don't overthink it too much. And it can be quite hard. Sometimes you might be able to sort of space out a bit, but just really focus on the question that you get asked and just try to remember that you're answering that question. And that's one of the best ways to stay engaged, I think. And then we sort of cover this. So how do you structure your question? So just making sure you use either the STAR or the PEE mnemonic. And then so, for example, today there was a new law that was passed about how patients can get a new reflection to ICU if they need it. So how they can get last year or two, which could be useful to think about. And then you also get asked your sort of role play station, so really make sure you practice them. And then if you do get asked to sort of break bad news, make
I'm not sure if Alice's Wi-Fi has just cut out. Um, but I'll just say if we have any questions, feel free to carry on popping them in the chat. And please fill out the feedback form. We really appreciate it. So I can see we've got a couple of questions through in the chat. So the first one is asking, what is the difference between panel and MMI interviews? And would you say preparation for the different interview types vary, or is it relatively similar? So just to answer the first part of your question, so a panel interview is where you are, it's more of like a traditional interview. So you're in one room and you're sat in front of some examiners and you stay with the same examiners for however long the interview is, be it 5, 10, 15 minutes, and they ask you questions and you just stay there and answer their questions. Whereas an MMI is you will have, say, 10 stations and you rotate round, and each station has a different examiner and each station assesses a different thing. So you could have one that's like a role play station, you could have one that's an ethical station, you could have a communication station, you could have one that asks you about your work experience. And so the key difference is an MMI, you will be interviewed by multiple different people, and a panel is just the same people for the entire interview. So the interview preparation varies in that it's a slightly different environment, but they will ask you the same kind of things, to my knowledge. Um, it's just probably worthwhile thinking about how you will cope with an MMI. So, for example, how will you cope with moving between different sessions? How will you make sure you leave the last session behind you? Whereas a panel, you have to think about how are you going to build rapport with this examiner throughout the 15, 20 minutes you have for the interview. So it's a slightly different environment. But definitely have a look online because there are lots of different articles that kind of give tips. I personally didn't do a panel interview, so I'm probably not the best to give advice for that. MMIs are really what I know best. And then why do you want to study medicine is a really interesting question. It's definitely personal for everyone. Like my reason will be different to Alice's, your reason will be different to your reason. So I'd say it's really important to start with why you personally want to study medicine. So think, why is it I actually want to apply aside from, you know, I like science, or I'm good at science, or it's a respected career. Why is it you specifically want to study medicine? Is it you had an experience as a child, or a family member is ill, or you think um, you want to specialize in a certain specialty. Why is it specifically you want to study medicine? And that's your best bet for answering the question. Um, if in doubt, um, make sure what you're saying is correct. So don't say, I want to do research, because, there are many other careers where you can do more research. Don't say, I want to help people. There are many more careers where you can help people. So it has to be specific to medicine. So yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, to be honest. I still find it quite tricky when people say, so why did you apply to medical school? I'm like, well, there's lots of reasons I went into it and it's really hard to answer. But those would be my tips as to how to approach it the best. I'm not sure if you've got any suggestions, Alice, because that's a really tricky one to try and answer, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably one of the hardest ones you get. And I think, sort of saying that you like science and you help people is sort of a good place to start, but I think you just need to build on that a bit more. And bringing in your work experience is a really good way of doing it, sort of saying that you saw this when you did this and you found that really inspirational, XYZ. Um, Other key things you can bring into that question is sort of about teamwork as well and sort of lifelong learning. That's all sort of keywords that they like as well. But really, I think the way that you can stand out compared to other people who answer that question is really to do with your work experience and what you've learned from that and how that's influenced your decision to continue medicine. Because I've had some friends who did work experience and hated it and then didn't apply to do medicine. So equally, it goes both ways. So really sort of mentioning that I think can help you set it out. But this is one question that's probably good to sort of come up with a bit of an answer. Don't make it sound like it's rehearsed, but make sure you know what you're going to say because most probably you're going to be asked that.
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity to showcase your work experience as well, because if it is like an 8-minute station and you just have to talk about why medicine, it's a long time to fill. It doesn't sound like a long time, but when you are actually in there, it feels like a long time to fill. So yeah, definitely talk about your work experience. Um, how can you stand out at interview? I'd say just be yourself. So don't try and like stand out. Just try and showcase your best self, be confident, have good body language, talk about the work experience and volunteering you've done and show them why you would be a brilliant person to give an offer to. Don't try and I would say don't try and be something you're not, just try and showcase your best self. Because at the end of the day, you want to find your best fit as well as them trying to find their best medical students. Um, and the way you can do that is some of the tips we suggested. Um, I think the way you can stand out as well is talking about your work experience, making sure you're reflecting on it. A lot of people just discuss what work experience they've done in quite a factual way, and volunteering as well in quite a factual way. But by having a really good developed reflection on what you've done, so saying I volunteered at a gastro ward for 4 weeks, um, and then talk about not only what you did, but say I was able to observe interactions between patients and doctors, and this showed me the importance of good communication, or I was able to see how the team coped in a high pressure scenario. This showed me the importance of speaking to people with respect, even when tensions are high, and showed me how important teamwork is in a high stakes environment. Stuff like that, that just shows you've really thought about it and you have quite an advanced ability to reflect, I think is really important. And I would say you can stand out by saying things that are true to you. So, not just saying rehearsed answers that perhaps you hear other people say. That's especially important with the why medicine. Um, so just making sure what you're saying is true to you, because the best way you can stand out is by being yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think bringing in sort of non-academic experience is really good as well. So if you've done any, if you've had a part-time job, or you play sports or you're like reading, any of these is a really good way of standing out as well. So I did a gap year. I did sort of worked in customer service for a year. So most of my examples were based on that, more so than the work experience, more like the work experience side of things, because I think you could just add a bit more reflection to it. So if you have got anything like that, really make sure you get them in. They like sort of people who are sort of well-rounded, who don't just focus on sort of the medicine side of things as well, who, work or go out with their friends or enjoy reading, whatever it is. So make sure you bring that into, because it shows that you're a well-rounded person.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Especially part-time jobs, that's a really good point. Because you can earn so much in a part-time job. I think I learnt more, I mean, like Alice, I think I learnt more from working throughout sixth form than I did from any work experience of volunteering I did, because that's where you're actually putting skills into practice. You're not just kind of watching things happen. So definitely talk about that kind of thing. So someone said, is it okay to ask about medical student life? So definitely. Um, what is the best or worst thing about being a medical student, and what surprised you the most? So I'd say the best thing about being a medical student is the sense of community. So I would say, um, as well as my friends that I have, you definitely go through medical school with your cohorts, with your year group, and you face the same challenges, you face the same, ups and downs. And I think by the end of 5 years together or 6 years together, if you integrate, it's definitely a really nice community feeling. And that's really special. I think that's quite different compared to other courses from what I've seen. So that's definitely something I've really valued at my time at medical school. The worst thing I would say, it can be quite stressful. So there's a lot. I mean, I won't lie, it is quite difficult, especially around exams. It can be quite hard to balance revision, placement, especially as you get into clinical years. At Leicester, you don't get time off to revise, you still have to go to placement. So that's quite difficult to balance. But you do adapt to it and you get used to it as you go through. So it kind of ramps up year on year. So it gradually gets harder, but you get better at it as you go through. So it's nothing that you can't manage. And if you get into medical school, you've already done A levels, and A levels are really hard. So it's nothing that you won't be able to do. And then what surprised me the most was, I think, the amount of respect people give you. But by that I mean when you are on placement, people will share their deepest secrets with you. They will allow you to examine them. They will allow you to be part of their care. And I think that was a big surprise to me, and it felt like a big privilege to be able to support people in that way and be part of their lives at such vulnerable moments. And that surprised me the most, because I thought I'd be more on the outside as a medical student. But as soon as you are a medical student, my experience has been people really respect that, and they allow you to take part in their care and support them at sometimes really difficult times in their life. So that has been a surprise, but it's also been, another highlight for me as a medical student.
Yeah, I think that was my best sort of the best thing is how you get to see how other people live and the experiences other people have had, and just how sort of it is a bit of an honor to be able to walk in one day and see all these amazing things happen, and people sort of trust you and you're able to sort of learn so much about people's lives, and they share sort of all their health problems as well. So it's really it's really, it's a really good thing that you're able to do. So I think that's one of the best things that I found about medical school. I think the worst thing is just at the fact that sometimes you are held to a sort of higher level to than to other sort of university students. So as a medical student, you have to sort of make sure you're following the right rules and everything, and going on to placement on the right time. So when other people might be allowed a day off there and here and there, you're not allowed that as a student, medical student. So just being aware of that you have to sort of be really organized, really punctual, and making sure you're kind of doing everything that you're told to do, even once you're sort of 5, 6 years down the line. So it can sometimes be a bit suffocating, especially as you sort of get near the end. But I think the fact that you've got all the good things sort of balance that off. And then, what surprised you the most? I think for me, it was just how the content's actually not too bad. It's just the sort of volume. So I was quite scared that I was never going to be able to sort of understand all these sort of cycles, Krebs cycles and stuff. And like, you're going to have to learn 10 times more than you did at A levels. But actually, the content's not too bad. It's just a bit of more the amount of stuff you have to learn. So just not being too put off by that, and realizing that as long as you sort of work as you go along, it's all sort of doable in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And just to bounce off what you said about placement and attendance and stuff, I think what surprised me was how long the years are. I don't know if this is a Leicester specific thing, but we still have another week before we break up for Christmas, and then we don't have the long summers that people have. So just definitely have a think that when you do apply for medical school, it is a long time. It is 5, 6 years, but also the years are quite long when you're in them. So once you finish third year, it's likely you might not be having the typical student 3 month long summers. So just have a think about it is definitely worthwhile, but it does have an impact on well, your life really, because you are effectively working. It's more of a job when you're in the later years. You're not really a student in the typical sense. Um, aside from the fact you don't get paid. So it definitely is quite difficult in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. It's like you don't get paid for it, and some of your friends who are doing other jobs,
Especially
all
now
those
everyone's
people.
graduated.
Yeah.
Leicester, we're doing, they make you do like nights and weekends and, you know, long shifts and you're not getting paid, which feels, it is good because you're learning, but then I think it's quite tricky mentally when you look at everyone else, perhaps that you went to school with, graduate, do a master's, start their lives as like proper adults, and you don't really get to do that. You're kind of delayed a little bit. Obviously, everyone catches up, so it's all fine, but that's quite difficult mentally, I think, as well. So just have a think about how you'll feel. It feels a long way off, but it comes around quickly.
Yeah, and definitely something that's more focused towards your latter years. Like, I think the first 4 years, you're kind of like, oh, this is great, and then
Definitely.
yeah, it sort of hits a bit more. But yeah, like I would definitely do it again if that's sort of any
Yeah,
conversation.
100%. And it goes a lot quicker than you think. Like I feel like when I realize I'm in fifth year, I'm also surprised. I feel like I'm still in first or second year, so it goes very fast. Leicester is, so someone's asked what is the teaching style like at your university? So Leicester is integrated. So we have both lectures and early clinical experience. We have about a week in first year, going up to a couple of weeks in second year, and then third year, fourth year, fifth year, you're full time on placement. In the preclinical years, so phase one, which is years 1 and 2, you have a lecture, and then you do a group work. And then you kind of go home and consolidate the knowledge. So I think that works really well for me. And also the group work's quite nice because it's a good way to meet people, especially at the start.
Yeah, Manchester's, I think it's PBL at the moment or some new sort of thing, but basically PBL. With a couple of lectures, but really not lecture based. It's a lot of self-learning. So if you do go for an interview at Manchester, make sure you emphasize how you can work on your own. Have you done a sort of EPQ? Have you done any sort of projects where you've done your own work to show that you'd fit in with the style? And you have early clinical experience as well. So similar to Amy, like you start in year 1, and then by year 3, 4, and 5, you're able to be in the hospital sort of 24/7. You're also able to intercalate as well, and there's sort of anatomy dissections as well. So there's some things, and you do also have practical sessions too, so some sort of skill sessions, so how to take bloods, how to take blood pressure, those sorts of things in first and second year too. So you have a bit of a mix of everything, but it's not sort of lecture based. I wouldn't say it was very much self-learning. So if you want to be sort of fed the sort of information, it might not be the best place to go, but they give you a lot of freedom, which also has its positives too.
Yeah, Leicester's probably more on the spoon feed side of things, which suited me, I think. So definitely have a look at, just think, what would I actually cope well with? What might I struggle with? What suits me most, and go with that. Because I mean, there are so many different types of medical school teaching out there, so you'll definitely find something that suits you.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think it definitely balances out by the end couple of years as well. So I think the first 2 years are very different compared to a university, but by sort of third, fourth, fifth year, you kind of all have the same sort of topics. You need to know all the conditions. So I think it balances itself out later. It's just more the sort of science stuff that I think differs personally. I think that's what I gathered.
And to be honest with, by the time you're in third, fourth, fifth year, I don't know if this is just like Leicester, we have very little lectures anyway.
Yeah.
So it becomes all self-guided learning anyway. So everyone eventually basically ends up with PBL. Um, it's just you kind of are more familiar with it by that point, so it's a bit easier to teach it yourself. Someone's asked, in terms of content, are you expected to learn everything in great depth or breadth or both? I would say probably a bit of both. So it depends preclinical versus clinical. So preclinical, you just learn basically, well, at Leicester, you learn the content that they taught you in the lectures. And then clinical, everyone has to do the UK MLA, which is the final exam set by, I think, the government, or I'm not sure who sets it, but everyone sits the same exam basically at the end of medical school. And there's a long list of conditions, and you basically just have to know, I say just, you have to know this long list of conditions, like symptoms, risk factors, how you diagnose it, how you treat it, complications. You don't have to know it like the level of a specialist, or even the level of a doctor beyond F1, F2 who's training to be a specialist. But you do have to be able to start work and be able to cope with what an F1 will see. But you do have 3 years of clinical medicine to learn this stuff. So the length of a normal degree, basically. So you kind of just pick it up as you go along. It's not like revising for an exam in 3 months. You have stuff that just goes into your long-term memory. Um, so it is easier than it sounds, even though it doesn't feel easy at the time. You look back and you're like, "Oh, okay, I have known this for 2 years now." So yeah,
Yeah, and there's loads of sort of resources to help you out, especially sort of the last couple of years, like question banks, that allow you just to sort of go over common topics over and over again. Um, so yeah, somehow it stays up there. I hope we
Blackbird will become your best friend.
But yeah, I think it's more personally, I think it's been more breadth, especially from a Manchester point of view, but definitely some things they like testing more on, and you come to know which things they are, and then in those sort of specific cases you can go into a bit more depth. But yeah, I think it's sort of just finding the balance for you and working out what your university does, and just sort of speaking to people in older years, looking at resources that the university provide. They're not trying to trick you again. They want you to pass. So just using everything that's available to you to be able to sort of do well.
Definitely. So someone's asked, is it true what people say about debt? So obviously everyone's financial situation is different. I will say personally, I have quite a lot of debt from obviously my tuition fees, and you have to take out a loan for maintenance. Well, you don't have to, you can choose to. But I didn't really have a choice in that I had to take out a loan for my maintenance for rent and food. So I mean, I would say I have a lot of debt. I will be paying it off probably a long, long time, my entire working life, probably. But I would still go back and do medical school despite that. I didn't have a choice whether or not to take out loans, because I wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise. So if you are in a similar background, and you are also kind of thinking, gosh, I'm getting into a lot of debt for this, I would say it definitely is worth it. Um, in hindsight, yeah, I would rather not have a lot of debt. But I would also not choose to not become a doctor because of that. And definitely, I've worked all summers at medical school to save up money, so you definitely can do that. I've also done tutoring work throughout the later years as well to save up money and try and, fund my medical school. So definitely don't let it put you off. And there are financial support available um, both from SFE, so that's Student Finance England. This is England specific, by the way. It's different for Wales and Scotland. But also your medical school has hardship funds. The BMA has a hardship fund. So speak to your medical school if once you are admitted that is something you're struggling with, because there is support available. And there are lots of people in the same boat. So I mean, most of my friends that I know are in similar amounts of debt. And it's not really like a debt. It's just well, it is a debt, but they take it off your pay. So you don't ever pay the money yourself. It gets taken off before you're paid. And it's just a proportion of your income after you earn above a certain amount. So you're not going to not be able to get a house. You're not going to not be able to buy food. It's not like your house is going to be repossessed to pay this debt. It is just more of a tax, is how I think about it. So definitely don't let it put you off.
No, 100% agree. Like I've got loans as well. And I think even my friends who don't do medicine have also got loans, maybe not quite as much, but still very substantial amounts, and they've done completely different degrees. So I think if you decide to go to university, you're going to get debt whatever you do. So I think if it's if it's a sort of balance between going to university and studying medicine, it depends what you want to do really. But I think it definitely shouldn't put you off it, and most people will be in exactly the same situation. And as Amy says, there's always a help out there as well. So always speak to your university, ask for help. And yeah, hopefully they might change it as well at some point and make it free and stuff. So like my last year's paid for. I think Amy, yours is the same. So
The NHS pays your fees last year.
yeah, you only pay for 4 years. So I intercalated as well, and they paid for my intercalation year too. So 2 years free. So it's that's got its perks. But yeah.
I mean, you'll still earn more. I mean, the way I thought about it is even if I go to university and get this debt, I'm still going to earn more as a doctor than I would as a doctor with the debt taken off every payday, than I would not going to university, not becoming a doctor. So in the long run, you do still earn more than you would have done if you didn't go to uni. So you're still in the plus compared to not becoming a doctor because it is still a good pay when you become a doctor. So definitely don't let it put you off.
Yeah. And
But
these
yeah.
are all things you can add into sort of your why medicine as well. And obviously not about debt, but why you sort of wanted to apply and stuff. It's sort of all relevant too. So it's good to think about these sorts of things now too.
So I think that's all the questions we have. If you do think of any questions after the call has finished, or in the next couple of weeks, we do have social media, so you can get in contact with Medics and Me on Instagram, and our social media team will pass loads of questions on, and we'd be happy to help out. We also have a feedback form, so if you do have any questions now that we didn't have a chance to get to, just pop them on the feedback form, and we will try and answer it on our social medias. But yeah, thanks for all the wonderful questions and for coming along this evening.
Thank you so much, Amy and Alice, for all your answers. That was really, really helpful. And if you missed any of the previous webinars, please go back on our YouTube and you can watch them all. And like Amy said, please do fill out the feedback form for the guys. That'd be really helpful. But thank you so much. And I hope everybody has